very interesting AP Univision poll on Latinos in the United States. Now, in this show, we've had some controversial discussions about Latinos in education before. And I've made the point that I think Latinos don't emphasize education enough in their culture. Now, that's very controversial. Go ahead. But, you know, we've talked it out, and I think there's so much potential. And the idea that that stupid stereotype, Mexicans are lazy, is the worst and most idiotic stereotype of all time. The exact opposite is true. But you need to. But if you get an education, you can make a lot more money using that same hard work, etc. We've had some really honest discussions about that on the show. Now, unlike what Eric Holder charges the rest of the country with, we're not afraid to talk about race openly, right? Now, the reason I bring up this poll is because they tackle that issue. Well, as it turns out, actually, these days, 87% of Latinos think that a college education is extremely or very important. For the American population overall, it's only 78%. So actually, Latinos care more about education than the overall American population. So I was ready to come out and say, so I read the first part of the poll and I go, okay, I guess I was wrong. So, but then I read the second part of the poll. And it says that, and by the way, one other thing about that, 94% of Latinos say they expect their own children to go to college. That's a huge number, 94%, okay? But when you go to people who actually have bachelor's degrees, overall American population, it's 30%, but for Latinos, it's only 13%. So it's much lower. So then, of course, you ask the question, why the disconnect? If Latinos want to go to college more, but they're going to college less, why is that happening, right? It's a very good question. So they asked, again, in this AP Univision poll. And the answers were overwhelmingly two factors, okay? The top reason for not completing a college degree was reluctance to borrow. And they're worried about getting in debt. And they said that it's cultural. And that their parents, their grandparents say, oh, no, don't borrow money. Getting in debt is a bad idea. That's really interesting, okay? And the second reason not to do it was that family responsibilities. So 52% said family responsibilities. They wanted to go to college, but they had responsibilities, and they had to go get a job. And the killer quote for me was somebody who's Angel Vasquez from Port Arthur, Texas, who said his grandfather raised him and had always told him, you either go to school immediately or you get a job immediately. Like what he wanted to do was he wanted to take some time to find the right school, etc. And they're like, no, family responsibility, get a job immediately. Okay, so, and then it wound up that he didn't go to school, and he regrets it because he thinks he could have made more money otherwise, and he's generally right. So then we get to the question of, okay, then is this a problem in the culture? Now, look, again, we're having an honest conversation about it, and some parts of different cultures are great, some are not so great. We've discussed a lot of things that are wrong culturally in different religions, etc. For example, in Islam, I've talked endlessly a lot about some of the cultural practices I don't agree with. And when you talk about debt and family responsibility, it seems like a good thing. You don't want to get into debt. Yeah, that makes sense. You want to have responsibility towards your family. That makes sense. But if it's keeping you from doing something logical, if the situation and the context is different than the one you grew up in, actually college costs are generally, I should say, debt is actually lower interest rates. It's actually a very good deal. Now, a lot of people come out of college, now they have all that debt and they can't get a job. It's not fail-safe, I get that. But overall, the numbers show you, if you get a college education, you're going to make a lot more money down the line. It makes sense. I think what I get out of all of this is that the younger generation of Latinos in the country totally get it. But the older generation are struggling a little bit. There was another part of the poll that showed that disparity, right? Where people who were born here, who are Latino Americans, stress education a lot more. People who were foreign born, not as much. And we got to get that older generation to get beyond it. It's a different context. And God, you got a great population that's, you know, and it's not just my stereotypes. We've done other stories of, you know, showing working hard, etc. We did a story yesterday about it. It's actually, another poll showed Hispanic Americans in this day and age are a nearly idyllic version of what we were in the 1950s as an overall country, what conservatives loved. Care about family, work hard, responsible, etc. Now use that in a smart way. And we got to help our parents and our grandparents get beyond that. So now, I'm going to do that cliche where when we have a story that's about one of us, one of our ethnicities, I ask that person, so, Jesus, does this ring true to you? Because I know Jesus and I have had this same exact conversation before.
Yeah. It's hard to disagree with a lot of it, especially the whole family priorities. And if you're not going to go to school, you better get a job. That really ringed in my household. I remember my mom telling me that all the time.
Yeah, and so it's not like it's opposed to school, but it's more pragmatic in a sense. Like,
right.
Let's get to earning, right?
Yeah, it was my mom. When I graduated high school, she wasn't. It wasn't like she didn't want me to go to college. She didn't push it as much. She said, "All right, if you don't go to college, you better get a job. I ain't gonna have you just at home thinking about it." So what I ended
which is fair.
Which I understand, because for her it was like, I came here at 15 and I've been working since 15. If you're 18 and you still don't have a job, something's wrong.
Yeah, but at the same time, a lot of do you also get the sense that a lot of younger Latinos get it? That, hey, wait a minute, why am I busting my ass here when I could be making 2 or 3 times as much if I had a college degree? Or no?
No, I think it's hard. I think it's a hard to point in either way, because I've seen both sides. There's some, like my younger brother who's 10 years younger than me, he's in college already, and I've seen some of his friends who are, they just got a job and they're working at the mall and they're pushing school. They're like, I'll go to school later, or they're at a community college, when they had the opportunity to go to a full 4-year university, and they don't.
Right.
Because they think, well, I already got a job right now and I'm working. They see it as, oh, I'm making money, it's something. But then again, like, you're right, you're missing the bigger picture, where you're wasting a lot more time.
Yeah, and look, they haven't done a poll on this. I would be shocked if I was wrong on this. Whereas the Asian culture stresses education tremendously, right? And then you go to any of the top colleges and have much higher expectations. It's not just you go to college, not all Asian, of course, but and maybe I'm speaking from my experience where I grew up, right? But if you told them, oh, I'm going to college, and those Asian parents and immigrant parents like my parents would say, of course you're going to college. What does that mean? The question is, are you going to Harvard? Okay, that's the question, right? And so when you have those expectations, well, then they wind up going to really good schools and making a lot more money. And so we can learn from what's right in that culture, and adopt it, and hopefully all learn together and realize that's the way to go, And so we want to push people in the right direction. And hopefully we're doing it in the right way and not the wrong way. But Anna has a really good point about this too. Anna, jump in here and tell us why, it might not just be a cultural thing. It might be the context of where you grew up.
Right. Well, our public education system puts Latino students at a major disadvantage. And the way that happens is the way education is funded in the United States. For instance, one of the major ways education is funded is through property taxes. Now, most Latinos come from poorer areas. And because of that, their schools are funded through less property tax.
Right.
So they don't have the same resources as schools in richer areas. Like, we did this story while you were gone, and I gave the example of Beverly Hills. Beverly Hills schools, of course, they get a ton more funding because of the fact that it's in a rich area, because properties cost a lot more there. But compare that to South Los Angeles, where property taxes aren't going to bring in as much money.
That's 100% right. And we've talked about this in my context too, where I grew up. We had a fairly well-off suburb. It wasn't crazy rich, but it was upper middle class, and we had enough money. We had enough money for lights for the football stadium, and we got, I think, a great education, right? And so then we have a step up. Whereas, for example, another team we used to play in football was Perth Amboy, and you go there, and they had a dirt field for a football field, but who cares about that? They couldn't take their books home because they didn't have enough books. Now, are we on the same level playing field? Of course we're not. Why? Because we had higher property taxes and they had lower property taxes. That ain't right. So then you take for example, in the context of this conversation, Latino communities, which happen to be in areas where property taxes are not as high, generally, not always, of course. And then you say, all right, well, now, okay, go ahead and compete. Well, that's not fair either. But that's a much larger issue, and we got to figure out how we're going to do education in this country without having it tied to property taxes, because that, you know, is an enormous inequity throughout the country that, you know, that a lot of people don't even understand. They say, what? If I did it, why can't they do it? Well, they didn't grow up in the same situation you grew up in. You could take your textbook home. That's part of why they couldn't do it and you could. So we got to figure that out, and that's why I'm not in favor of, I mean, this is another larger conversation, why I'm not in favor of affirmative action based on race, but I think affirmative action based on socioeconomic conditions for whatever race you might be is, you know, a very interesting conversation. Because a kid who's poor in Kentucky or West Virginia, white, black, Latino, it doesn't matter, it doesn't have the same opportunities as I did growing up. And so if he gets the same grades as I do, should he get into a better school? Hell yes, he should get into a better school.